Hi, I'm Terry. I'm a heroin addict. Okay, so check this out. Think about this for one moment, because you don't want to take the chance of missing what's really happening around us. On June the 10th, 1935, the world changed. And that's when Bill and Bob met and Alcoholics Anonymous was formed. They furnished us with this beautiful book, which has been the bedrock for other fellowships to come. But 10 years ago, nearly to this day, one man is here, Paul F. Paul, stand up, please. All right, so hold on before you start going nuts. All right, I just want you to hear this. This is our Bill Wilson. So what happened is that Paul saw what was going down, right? Heroin was just starting to come back with a vengeance. And so he did something about it. The power of one when guided by God in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so he started that first meeting 10 years ago, and here we are tonight. So what a philosopher dubbed the year when AA started is they called it Annus Mirabilis, the year of the miracle. Well, guess what? That miracle was being renewed every time. It was renewed in 2004 when Paul took Heroin Anonymous into a halfway house, and it's being renewed tonight as Heroin Anonymous takes a giant leap forward. Because we know, as we sit here tonight, the dope is flowing. It's flowing from Asia. It's coming across the border. But just like it's flowing, the members of Heroin Anonymous are reaching out into the darkness, where only we can shine the light, a light that leads others to a better life. So our speaker tonight is a man with over 30 years of sobriety who has carried a message of experience, strength, and hope, a message born out of the big book, a man who has carried a beautiful message of hope around this planet. He has dedicated his life to the service of God, his fellow man, and his addicted children. He has been in all sorts of fellowships and involved in all sorts of ways, but he's a heroin addict at the core. And tonight we get to welcome our dear friend, Ken C. Yeah!
Ken Cross. I'm an addict. I suffer from alcoholism. Thank you, Terry. Ooh, I have to gather my breath. First, before I do thank yous, congratulations. You know, Terry did something I was going to do, which is to say, thank you to Paul, the World Services Committee. 29 years ago, I was part of another fellowship's first World Service Convention, and I had an experience that I know Paul had tonight and the other members of the board. All of a sudden, you do all this work, you write literature, you make phone calls, you answer phone calls, you send out starter packets and whatnot, and then you're sitting in a room like this and somebody stands up from North Dakota. I guarantee you that when they were doing that, they weren't thinking, we're going to send this to Alabama. It just doesn't go like that. That's not where your head is at when you're doing this stuff. You don't understand the grace that's wrapped in that service work that really is unfolding, and you're not even a part of it. We did stuff like that when we were 9 months sober. We had no idea at our convention that I was going to be sitting next to people from Alaska. That shit just doesn't happen on our own. I don't know about you guys, but everything I did on my own failed miserably. And so you guys are really, really blessed to have Paul here tonight and to have the first World Service Committee here tonight. And I'm going to tell you something else, and it is that, and I tell this to other programs, learn to appreciate your roots, because you're a tree that's growing, expanding, taking over, and if you don't appreciate your roots, the tree will die. Learn your history. Learn the people that are of service. Learn how to continue to be of service. If you don't know how to do something, ask somebody that came before you. And when they tell you, we did that 5 years ago and it didn't work, listen to them. Because I've sat in a lot of committee meetings arguing with a lot of people about stuff saying, you know, we did that 10 years ago and it really collapsed hard on us, or it really cost us a lot of money, you know? And now that I'm done with the congratulations, you know, thank you to the committee. Thank you to Jeff, my email friend over there, who asked me to come over here. You know, for a while, somebody was asking me to try to get a couple of other people to come speak for you, and I was kind of floored when he said, would you come do it? And thanks to my friend Terry for introducing me. I love Terry a lot, and my friend Alan sitting behind him with his wife, who I've known. I've been coming to Arizona for 12-step work since 1985, you know, and I've made a lot of friends. I just forgot his name. There's a new gentleman here who I met in San Juan Capistrano, and I spoke over there a couple of months ago, and he told me he's back in Arizona out of treatment, and I said, without a doubt, Phoenix is the best city to recover in my opinion, other than Los Angeles, because it's my home. The enthusiasm for service work, the commitment to the 12 steps in the big book, and the commitment to sponsorship here and meetings is unlike anything I've seen anywhere else in the world besides Los Angeles. And I have spoken from Costa Rica to Russia to Glasgow to Hawaii, and let me tell you, what is going on in Phoenix in recovery is special. You know, you have a great thing here to grab onto and to hold onto. You know, and you hear me getting choked up because I'm so grateful to be alive. When I was a newcomer, some of you old hardcore heroin addicts might remember a writer and a poet named Cubby Selby. He wrote Last Exit to Brooklyn. He wrote Requiem for a Dream, which are some pretty sick movies if you ever see them. And Cubby was a friend of mine. And one day he said to me, when you're really in touch with your recovery, you'll walk around on the verge of tears. You know? I mean, it doesn't matter what fellowship I'm in, when I see a sobriety countdown and I see 3 or 4 people with one day standing there, I remember my first day. Every one of us had a first day if you're new. You know, my 31 years plus started with day 1. You know, and it was fucking harsh. You know? And we're so blessed. You know, Cubby taught me a couple things. One day I got sober in Los Angeles. I was living in a stolen car, which I drove for 3 years. There really was no, you know, I had just left the biker world, and I wasn't going to go to NA. There was only AA. There was 2 CA meetings in the world at the time. And I was sitting on the back porch at a house in Beverly Hills, feeling just a little out of place. You know, like thinking, who are these people? What am I doing here? I had less than 60 days. And you know, like a lot of you, I'm sitting there chain smoking because I didn't know what to do with my feelings. And by the way, Cubby died of emphysema from his smoking over his feelings. But he came up to me and he said, hey kid, what are you doing out here? And I said just what I told you. I don't feel good, I don't fit in, I don't know who these people are. I don't know anything about what's going on with the sobriety stuff. Everybody knows each other, it's a big clique. And he goes, let me tell you something. How do you know that your future wife isn't in that room, your future employer, your next best friend, the greatest love of your life isn't in that room 25 feet away? Get the fuck off your ass and get inside and start talking to people. And I was like, you know, and that's the way the old timers kind of used to talk to us. You know, sit down, shut up, and listen. And then they would preface it with the fact, we tell you that because we care more about your life than your feelings. So when you think some old timer like Terry is giving you a hard time, or some guy like Alan is riding you too hard, it's because they've seen too many of you die. I was sitting in the men's meeting today, and all of a sudden I got a text, please call me right away. And I found out that a woman that I've known for 27, 28 years, who used to run one of the central offices in LA, was found with a needle in her arm this morning. You know? None of us are invulnerable to the disease. You know? It's so easy to slip away from the one thing that saves your life. And if you're new here, this is what this is about. This isn't about getting you off of your drug problem. This isn't about getting you to cut back on your Jack Daniels consumption. This is about saving your life one day at a time. Because if you stick around here, or you not stick around here, if you continue to drink and use, there's only three options: jails, institutions, and death. And I've seen friends of mine go to all three places. And it's sad. It's really sad when somebody's got a family or somebody's got children and you're bringing all that trauma and terror into your house and into your family. I think I'll breathe. Anyway, I'm really grateful to be here. As I said, I got sober on February 3rd, 1983. My first 12-step meeting was January 14th. I was living in a stolen car. I thought I was just in between jobs and it was going to get better. I had pulled another geographic where I'd stolen money, stolen some drugs, and figured I could get out of town and get it together one more time. I had repeated the same thing over and over again and kept having the same results. And I went back to Los Angeles. I had no idea where I was going to go. I worked in the rock and roll business for most of the 70s. I used to get called up to go on tour, and I mean big tours, concert arena tours, not like nightclubs and stuff. And I'd be dope sick. I'd have to get a bottle of Valium. I'd drink wine. I'd take hot baths and hot showers all day long, and then I'd find some coke to shoot to take the edge off, And 1980 was the last tour that I did where I went out under those circumstances, and my boss was a practicing heroin addict, so I always made sure we had rigs and dope when we were on the road, and it got to the point where he had to fire me because I couldn't do my job anymore. So I had a practicing heroin addict tell me I wasn't good enough. And that was years before I got sober. And that was just about halfway into my bottom. Because my bottom lasted 6 years. I started spiraling out of control in the late 70s and just kind of wore it out. I went from psychosis to paranoia to robbing to stealing, just everything you do to survive. The one thing that we know how to do here is to survive. And what happened for me is I went back to LA. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had this car. I was parking it up in the hills at night and putting towels in the window so if the cops came by, I could get my act together for a minute. I was stealing food out of Ralph's up my coat sleeves. I was, eating blueberry muffins from the 7-Eleven, and I was cleaning up in parks and, washing in the sinks and hanging out in parks all day reading the paper, just trying to find people to go crash on their couch or take a shower or do anything. And I had one friend left who was willing to take me to dinner. And I met him at Barney's Beanery in LA, which is his old rock and roll dive. And he said to me, there's another guy coming for dinner and he's my sponsor. And I went, what the fuck are you talking about? And he said, well, I'm clean and sober for 90 days. He goes, I've been in AA for a year and a half. And I was like, clean and sober? What does that mean? I had no concept of that. I thought easy does it meant don't tailgate. And this guy's sponsor showed up, and the guy that I was meeting for dinner, he and I used to shoot dope. We used to put liquid cocaine in our eyeballs. We did stuff that most normal drug addicts wouldn't even think of, And I'm like, what the hell are you guys talking about? And they gave me some rap about, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? I'm sure, and I could give a shit. All I wanted was a hamburger and a beer and a couch and a shower, you know? And they gave me the thing, if you're willing to go to a meeting with us, you can crash at my place. And I thought, well, this is great. I'll do whatever you want if you're going to feed me and give me a roof over my head and let me work for you tomorrow. And I had no conscious plan of never getting high again. I had no conscious plan of never drinking again. You know, and they took me to a meeting the next day. I was completely uncomfortable. I hated it. I didn't relate to the speakers. I wasn't happy. And I just wanted to get out of there. All I wanted to do was go outside and smoke. And I just didn't want it. You know, it wasn't in my mindset that I needed to change my life and clean up my act. I don't know about you guys, but I tried it before. You know, I'd always dried out, you know, especially when I was broke, I dried out real quick. And, you know, and what happened for me that night is they opened that meeting up to participation, and the first miracle of the 12 steps happened for me. There was a guy in the back of the room, and he looked like this crazy tweaking Kramer from Seinfeld with his fucking crazy hair. And he talked about that he was back from a relapse. That he had 9 months and he went out. And he described his relapse to a T. And I related to every single thing he talked about. Because I had lived that life. I had lived the life crawling around on the floor. I had lived the life of, you know, taking rigs out of the garbage and boiling them, and sharpening points on matchsticks, and cutting the rubber down with razor blades, and using preparation H or butter to loosen the rig, you know. I see there's some people that relate to that, huh? By the way, the first addiction of my life, on New Year's Eve, 1969, before most of you were born, I was in a little hippie house with psychedelic blue light posters on the wall, listening to Led Zeppelin 1 and 2 on a record player. And some guy said, "Hey man, do you want to try this?" And I was like, "But that's a syringe." You know, I'd seen Reefer Madness in high school. You know? Now you got to realize, I was taking psychedelics at 16. I left home at 16. I did my first bit of time in a federal jail when I was 17. But you know, a syringe? I don't know about that. I was a hippie from Greenwich Village. I don't know about that. And I stuck out my arm. I didn't even ask what was in it. You know? Everybody looked like they were having fun, so I joined the party. You know, I stuck out my arm, they hit me with this stuff, and it turned out to be what you guys call today dust. But it was ketamine, right? You know, little tranquilizer in a syringe. And I thought, now that's a delivery system I can get used to right there. And, you know, and within months I was addicted to black tar. And that gooey black tar kind of had a taste for me, and I had a taste for it. And I'm one of those, I went from being a little psychedelic hippie to being very interested in Class A narcotics. I would take LSD, I shared this with somebody today. We would take acid, and I don't know about how many of you guys ever took acid or really powerful hallucinogen. But you know that really greasy point you get to right after you peak, and you go like this, and it feels like you got a cake of butter on your face? And you'd be sitting there going, oh man. I would think, this seems like a good time to shoot some heroin and take the edge off. So I don't know about how many of you guys have ever stuck a rig in your arm while you're fucking tripping, but everything gets really large. And it really gets your attention, you know? And it's just such a crazy life. And it all seemed like it was so much fun at the time. I used to think that anybody who didn't do it was square and didn't know how to get high. You know, even when I first got sober and went to meetings, I thought, I wouldn't party with 90% of these people in these meetings because they didn't know how to shoot dope. They were talking about smoking shit and getting the curtains high, and I'm like, you fucking guys, what a waste. You know? Give me a spoon. Waste not, want not. You know, I had the great pleasure of killing my wife on heroin one night. You know, I know all of you guys have gone and heard this, you know, you went and saw the dealer, and he goes, oh, dude, I got the kind. And you're like, oh, yeah, right, just give me the fucking shit. And he had the kind, and I went home, and I was married at the time, if you want to call it a marriage. This is one of those things where you meet a girl at work, and you're doing coke by noon. And then 3 weeks later, you show up at her house, and she has a box of 100 brand new syringes, and you go, oh, wow, I think I'm in love. And then you find out she's a lesbian or bisexual who's into bondage, and you're like, no, I'm really in love. And then I said to her, have you ever done heroin? And she goes, no, why? And I said, I have this little thing called a speedball that I think you're really going to enjoy. Kelly knows about that. And so naturally, I moved in 3 weeks later with her and her girlfriend. And then her and I got married 4 or 5 months after that, and I went on tour the day after the wedding, and she moved in with a coke dealer down the street. But today she's actually got 2 or 3 years, which, thank God. Because, the guy with the kind that night, I was kind enough to give her the first shot. And naturally mine was bigger than hers. And I went in the kitchen and got mine ready and came back into the bedroom because she'd answered the phone call and she was purple for some reason and I couldn't figure out what happened, And it took me about 15 or 20 minutes of my valuable time to revive her and get her back to breathing and awake. And then I took half of my shot and threw it in a spoon and did what I had left, and it almost killed me. It almost killed me. There's no way I wasn't going to do that fucking shot if it was the kind, And so that insanity, the complete insanity of shooting dope. And I don't get to talk about shooting dope much because most of the other fellowships look down on it. You know what I mean? They don't like to hear about you pulling rigs out of trash cans and stuff, And, and the reality was when this guy shared about his relapse, I identified with everything. And then he said the first thing that was the miracle of recovery for me. He said the reason he was back in a meeting was because this is where the hope was. So if you're a hope-to-die dope fiend and you think you're just too cool for this gathering of people, think about that fucking statement right there. You're a hope-to-die fucking junkie dope fiend and we're not good enough for you. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black, you know what I mean? And now I'm 31 years old, living in a stolen fucking car, actually believing that I'd grown up to become the piece of shit that my biker ex-con stepfather told me I was going to be. I thought I was worthless and I thought I was absolutely going crazy. And it got my attention. And then after the meeting, this gentleman gave me a big book. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am to see you guys using the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the only reason I say that is because it truly saved my life and changed the way I think about who I am and what I believe. Because I had grown up thinking all sorts of things negative about myself. I had come to believe that I wasn't worth anything. I have a mother that died at 47 from alcoholism in a car crash where she broke her neck and back in 6 places and lived on a ventilator for 3 weeks. My stepfather was an ex-con, patch-wearing biker that's buried out in the desert in Tucson, from what I understand. The last time I saw him was at a strip club with a whole lot of pistols and a whole lot of motorcycles. And so there was no way I was going to be an alcoholic, And then at the meeting, some guy gives me a big book and says, you need to take this home and you need to read this. And you need to read chapter 3 more about alcoholism because you're a really sick fuck. Forget the first part of the book. And he says, if you have any problem with the words alcohol or alcoholism, you substitute it for heroin or heroinism or cocainism, and you identify with the similarities and the feelings. And I went back and I read 2 pages of that book, and it was like a wall of bricks fell on me. Because all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is me. This is exactly how I feel. And then I don't know about you guys, but then I read a little further and I got into the doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I left many a morning shot on the nightstand I left many a morning Heineken in the refrigerator, and for some reason when I woke up, somebody had always stolen it, you know? And then you get to the story about the jaywalker, and when I share this in AA or even CA meetings, people are like, oh man, you're fucking sick. And you guys are gonna really relate because, you know, the jaywalker runs out in front of the bus with his little broken arm and, you know, I jaywalked with bullet trains. Because I took shit and beat it with a hammer and cold soaked it just to get it into a syringe. It didn't matter if it got me up, if it got me down. It didn't matter if it was window pane LSD or Thai white dope. If I could get it in a syringe for that delivery system, I was there. You know, if that's not jaywalking with a bullet train every time you stick a needle in your arm, I don't know what you're thinking. And I did it over and over again. There were times that I would do a hit, and I'd come to the next morning, and they'd say, we thought you were going to die. And I wouldn't remember anything, not a thing. And you know what I'd do? I'd go, wow, that was fucking great. Let's do it again, you know? And so for me, when I got that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I read chapter 3 more about alcoholism, it was the beginning of changing my life forever. You know, because all of a sudden I realized I had a disease that wanted me dead. I only pray that you're desperate enough to understand that fact, that this addiction and alcoholism are a disease. I mean, if they were shooting heroin before they were stomping on grapes, it might have been Heroin's Anonymous long before Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, if they'd identified whatever the disease was earlier on, but guess what? AA came first and got it and figured it out and put it on paper, and we are blessed that we get to borrow it. We're blessed that we get to use those spiritual principles and those spiritual values that are in that book that tell us how to live life. And I just distracted myself, so that's really good. I actually had a point going and it disappeared. And it was really good, too, if I could only remember. Oh, I know what it was. And this always gets me. You know, I was diagnosed, in the last 10 or 12 years, I've had 4 surgeries, 2 chemos, 1 radiation, been told I was going to die twice within 90 days. I died not on the operating table. I died in the recovery room and hung around on the ceiling and watched them for a while and didn't feel it necessary to go yet. But when I first was diagnosed with my brain tumor, within hours after being home, I was on Google. Fucking brain tumor what? Brain surgery what? Brain cancer what? I wanted to know every bit of information and how I'm going to survive this situation. You guys come here, I tell you you have alcoholism and addiction, and this is fucking gonna kill you, but I have a treatment plan for you. If you want to live and have a good life, I have a treatment plan for you. Here's this magical blue book. Take it home and read it, and you fucking go home and chop lines on top of it or roll joints with it. Use it as a coaster for your cold beer. I can't tell you how many people's houses I've been in and seen rings on big books, you know. You know, it's the only disease that tells us you don't have it. And I guarantee you, you will die. And not only will you die, here's the scariest fucking part. On page 66, it talks about resentments. And it talks about resentment being the #1 offender. Well, over my time, I've come to believe many different things. And that's kind of another thing, because I really think inappropriate behavior is the #1 offender. Because inappropriate behavior separates you from God. But the fact is, there's a line there that says if you continue to participate in this stuff, the insanity of alcohol will return and you will surely drink. Now, I don't know about you guys. I don't give a shit about whether I drink or not. But the fucking insanity of alcohol that's going to make me drink, that's some uncomfortable shit. Because I remember being crazy. I remember fucking robbing people. I remember being in gun battles where my best friend got his head blown off. I remember being in a drug deal ripoff where my roommate got his throat cut. You know, I've been in some fucking insane shit, and I don't ever want to go back there again. I live a really good life today. It was funny, I was doing the men's workshop today. Those guys did a great job with that with the workbook. And I forget how many questions it was probably 10 or 15, and I was in there with Steve A. And we start reading this, and I'm realizing I don't have anything to write here. You know, I don't have any answers to questions. I mean, you know, questions to answer. Because the reality of it is that I've worked all 12 steps. I continue to work all 12 steps. I stay in the middle. At 31 years, I go to a meeting every single day. I go to 7 to 9 meetings a week probably. You know, I sponsor guys from years to 28 years. You know, I talk to people with more time than me every single day. I do all the really simple stuff that there is. You know, I hear people, here I'm going on another rant, but that's okay. You need to hear it in case you don't know. You know, I hear this shit about, you've got to do the work. You got to do the work if you don't do the work. The work, if you don't do the work, you don't know what's going to happen. You got to do the work. I've dug fucking ditches in Tucson in Arizona in August. That's fucking work. When you're going to lunch at 10:30 and drinking beer and sweating your ass off and you got calluses on your hand from digging ditches, that's fucking work. I've never woken up in the morning, read out of the big book or the 12 and 12, said prayers and meditated, you know, talked to sponsees and felt like, man, I need a fucking shower. I need to go back to sleep. Let me take that back. Maybe a couple of fifth steps I needed a shower. What we have here is a process of recovery that unfolds in front of you and it allows you to understand how to develop a connection to a divine intelligence. I hated the word God when I got here. I really, to this day, hate the word Him in any of the literature. You know, that was kind of Bob's doing. Bill was never a fan of that. Bill was a spiritualist. Bill believed in seances. Houdini was one of he was one of Houdini's biggest fans, you know, for the spiritualism. Bill was known and proven to have talked to dead people, which means he had interactions with ghosts, documented stuff. He did LSD experiments only for the sake of finding another way to develop a connection with a higher power. They literally would have 6 AA members in a room with a doctor. 2 of them would take acid, high dose, 2 would take low dose, and 2 would be the guides. And they would there's to this day journals in AA in New York documenting Bill's seances. It's called the Spook Book. And there's the LSD journals that document all of this stuff. So if you think we're weird, you know, and I also forgot what I was talking about. See, this is a good thing that I can guarantee you, you will not get a canned talk from me. You know what I mean? It just ain't gonna happen. Where was I? Yeah, 18 parts of one talk thrown into like 1 minute, you know? It was obviously about the big book. Oh, I know what it was about. It was about the fact that if you're new and you have problems with God and you have problems with a religion, you know what? I hated church. I hated going to church. I was sent there I thought it was a punishment, you know. I swore I would never go back to church again. I spend more fucking time now in church basements than I ever did in my entire early life, you know. And the reality of it is, even though I hated the word God, I'm okay with it now because I understand it's too big of a concept. You know, what I do understand is when it talks about we agnostics about a creative intelligence, it talks about the universal power and a universal force greater than yourself. And if you're new, all we want you to do is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. It sums it up in 11 words. It's not hard. It won't make you sleepy, you know. It doesn't ask you to do anything that's, you know, a little too much. It's having had a spiritual awakening. We try to carry this message. The message is that we take the steps and we have a spiritual awakening. Not that we take the steps and we get clean. It's that we have a spiritual awakening, we develop a connection to a power greater than ourselves, and then we seek to improve our conscious contact with a power greater than ourselves. It doesn't say we get on our knees and pray every morning. It doesn't say we get on our knees or we sit at our table and we recite the third step prayer, the seventh step prayer. It says we seek to improve. Now, one thing I've noticed on this trip to Arizona is there's a lot of fucking dudes running around in tees that look like they're on roids. I don't know if that's a new thing now, or if you guys just don't have fucking jobs and have too much free time. But if you're going to the gym and you're working out, and I'm going to use this analogy, if you're going to the gym and working out, and you're going, oh dude, my delts aren't getting any bigger anymore. You know, some trainer's going to say, well man, do some bent over reverse butterflies. And you go, oh, great idea, I'll mix it up. I'll shock my muscles into a new form of training, you know? Well, guess what seeking to improve a conscious contact means? It means we don't do the same thing. Because the same thing will get you the same thing. And if you're seeking to improve, you're always out there looking for how to get better at a source of empowerment that will solve all your problems today. Because when I went through those questions this morning, and it said, how do you deal with fear, anxiety, frustration? I went, I don't have that shit. How do you deal with financial insecurity? I don't have that shit. I haven't worked at a real job in like 12 years. I'm not fighting. I don't have fear of financial insecurity. I don't have fear of it. I get letters from the IRS and I go, again? I call my CPA. I say, here, deal with this. You know, people die. I go, okay, what are we going to do about this? You know, I don't get crazy. I don't get anxious because I've learned how to develop a relationship with this power greater than myself that makes me aware that all I have is for now. There's only one August 2015 that you'll ever live in. Right here, right now. Your day begins and ends now. It's really just that simple. You know, you've heard it before. Living in the past, living in the future, it's the greatest jail with 2 bars that you'll ever be trapped in. You know, what's the point? The point is having had a spiritual awakening. Now, when I was new, I would say to old-timers, I hear everybody talking about their relationship with God. I don't get it. I feel empty. I would sit at my kitchen table and I would try to meditate. And I would do what I just said. I would say the 3rd step prayer because it's easy to memorize. I would say the 7th step prayer because it's easy to memorize. I could never say the 11th step prayer because I couldn't memorize that. But I made up my own version of it. And then I would sit there and meditate, and what I was really doing was worrying about traffic on the way to work. Or I was really worrying about if my crew of workers had done what they were supposed to do. And I said to these old-timers, you know, I don't feel it, you know, because I was told to act as if when I got here, because I didn't believe in anything. You know, I was a complete agnostic, almost borderline atheist. You know, and it's one of my pet peeves in the big book that they talk down about agnostics. But what they fail to mention is one of the things that they included is the spiritual appendix in the back. Now they claim it was written by Herbert Spencer, who, if you look up who Herbert Spencer was one of the greatest agnostics in the 1800s. But being alcoholics, they misquoted the wrong guy. It was really written by another agnostic named William Paley, who was also one of the greatest agnostics. But we read this stuff at meetings, and yet they put agnostics down. But for me, and I, tell you that I still have a hard time with any of that language and that wording. For me, as I said, I just believe in this divine intervention that we have going on here. And one more time, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what I was saying. It's all good. So I would say to these old-timers that I'm not feeling it, because they used to say, throw your keys under the bed, and when you're down there on the floor, say your prayers. And I'm like, man, that's so fucking hokey. I'm living in West Hollywood. I'm not getting on my knees. I don't care what you say. And, I tried it a few times, and then they would say, well, go pray to the ocean. It's a power greater than yourself. And I'm like, I'm not going to go to the fucking ocean, and then I got to the concept where, well, I'd seen Star Wars on mushrooms about 7 times, so I could go with the force factor and, go there and, all that kind of stuff. And, but then this old timer in the cranky, well, kid, just ask God to reveal himself to you as he truly is. And I was like, okay, I'll try that. And I'd go and I'd lay in bed at night, and I lived in this little 1-bedroom apartment in Venice where the sleaze meets the breeze. And I would lay in bed and I'd go, God, please reveal yourself to me as you truly are. And I would say it over and over again like a mantra. And I kept wanting, the white light experience to burst through the windows, or the dresser drawers to burst into flames. I wanted the Bill Wilson, Belladonna experience. And it never happened, and I'm like, God damn it, what's this about, And for years, I just walked around, and that hole got bigger and bigger in my gut, That thing just started to expand again, where I got really uncomfortable in meetings. Now I was sponsoring people, I was going to meetings, I had service commitments, all of that stuff. And I said to an old timer, I said, man, something's really going on. And he said, why don't you take a 12 and 12 and go do another 4-step? And I went up to this monastery outside of Los Angeles, and I'd made friends with a Benedictine monk when I had about a year sober, going up on retreats. And he said to me, yeah, I'll give you a cabin, do what you want to do. And I went and wrote out this inventory with him based on the 12 and 12. Then I went and read it to him, and when he was done, he goes, okay, let's get on our knees and pray. And I'm like, oh, no, not this shit again. And we did we said a prayer, and then he goes, it sounds to me like you don't have a personal relationship with a God of your own understanding. And I said, well, you know what? I have a problem. I don't like getting on my knees. I really have a problem praying. I've prayed, I've asked, I've done this, I do all this stuff, and it just feels unauthentic. It doesn't feel real. And Francis looks at me and goes, I don't pray on my knees. And I went, what do you mean? I've seen you in services. You're up, you're down, you're running around swinging the incense thing. And he goes, oh, dude, that's Catholic aerobics. We just do that for show. He said, when I get up in the morning, he goes, I sit in my easy chair. It overlooks this orchard. I read some literature. I try to find an ideal that strikes me. And then I contemplate on the ideal. Then I say some prayers. I talk about what's affecting me today. And then I close my eyes and I meditate. Now, if you don't know what affecting me today means, in the 12 and 12, in step 12, oh, here, we'll go on another rant for a second. For those of you that haven't read the 12 and 12, I highly suggest it, because if you think that the big book has all the answers, you're going to be in for a really rude surprise. If you think you're going to work a really good 6 and 7 step out of the big book, you're in for a really rude surprise. Those 2 paragraphs blossom into 43 paragraphs in the 12 and 12. And a little bit on step 12 in the 12 and 12 changes to 3 pages that are a synopsis of the first 12 steps, 3 pages about carrying the message, because everybody talks about, oh, I'm going to go do a 12-step and, go to a guy's house and we're going to save his life, which is all beautiful. But then there's 13 pages that everybody kind of forgets about, and it's called Practicing These Principles in All Our Affairs, which means cut the fucking inappropriate behavior out and get right with God and get right with your fellow human beings, because you need to quit hurting other people and hurting yourself. But that's just my opinion. But in that synopsis of those 3 pages, Bill talks about 6 and 7, and he says we pray on a daily basis for our character defects based on the causes and conditions of said day. Now that's what Francis was trying to tell me about. Because I don't know about you guys, but there's days where I can go hours without any rage, right, Jeff? Hours without any rage. And then somebody will cut me off on the freeway, and I'll have a rage attack, like I want to pull somebody out of the car and beat them to death with a hammer. Now this is after an hour of morning meditation, mind you, Or there's days when I was new where I would get that letter from the IRS and I'd go, oh my fucking God, my life is over, And the reality of it is, based on the causes and conditions jealousy, envy, fear, anger, you know. And so what I was told is to try to get really current. You know, there's a lot of talk about 10 steps. This is what I do, because I know people struggle with 10 steps. I have a 10-step format that I leave right next to my computer because, like most addicts, I have to check Facebook before I go to bed. There might be something really important that happened down the street that I got to see the picture about, so when I go to the morning meeting, I can have a conversation. So I keep this little 10-step format next to the computer, and I really just read it and review my day, you know? And one of the great things, and I shared this maybe with Terry the other day, in 1950, Bill gave a speech, and he wrapped up the speech by saying, you know, don't make a project out of working the steps. You know, live your life to the best of your ability. Go out every day and treat everybody as you would want to be treated. And at the end of the day, when you review your day and you stop and take a look, you've probably worked all 12 steps in that day. Because that's what it's really about. It's about living life on life's terms, being the best person you can be, not hurting yourself and not hurting anybody else. You know, that whole thing about work and that whole thing about doing this and isn't it fun to just sit down there and stare at me? How exciting is this? I hate speaker meetings. I rarely go to speaker meetings. I don't even like speaking anymore. I've heard this story. You guys don't get it, you know? 31 years of trying to make this more entertaining gets like a little old after a while. And I had a point there, but now I forgot it again. It'll come back to me. You know, our reality, oh, I know what it was. You know what it is? If you have an ADD busy head like me, you know, I'm trying to think, like, what's interesting, or what's to the point, or what will the people in this room relate to? You know, how can we present some information that you guys will actually grab onto and understand? And I'll tell you just some really simple things, because we just talked about the 6 and 7 step. What I really liked and what I really noticed about this convention, I noticed a lot of talk about 6 and 7 and a lot of talk about 10, 11, and 12, you know? And those are the steps that will absolutely change your life. Now, if you're confused about 6 and 7 like I was, I mean, I read those 2 paragraphs in the book and I went, shortcoming? What the fuck is a shortcoming? You know, I was absolutely clueless. Character defect? What do you mean character defect? Like a junkie that doesn't have character defects? Yeah, right, that's gonna happen. And, you know, and I had my first sponsor who had 5 years, and at the time 5 years seemed like, wow, that's a lot of time. And I would pray, and I'd say, please let me not steal, and then I'd go steal. Please let me not have sex with newcomers, and then I'd go have sex with newcomers. It was the 80s. You know, what can I say? And I finally went to another old-timer, and I said, look, I keep praying, I keep thinking God's going to come down with this big ice cream scoop and take all my character defects away, and you're blessed, my son. You'll never have lust again. Right, okay, we know how well that worked. And, you know, and I went to this old-timer, and he was a character. He was an old biker in the 50s, straight out of the Wild Bunch, with the fucking leather jacket and the greasy Brill Cream pompadour and, you know, looking badass. Except now he was a Supreme Court judge for the state of California. And we hit it off because I still ride Harleys and he still rode motorcycles while he was still alive. And I said, Don, I said, man, I pray about this shit, and all I do is see something that I want to steal. I pray about this shit, and I see this newcomer, and all I want to do is, you know what? And he goes, you know what? Just be the best tree you can be. And I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? You know, you guys will have this experience if you hang around Terry or Howard or some of these other guys, you know. It's like all of a sudden something will come out of their mouth and it's like lotus blossoms and hot wind at the same time. And you're like, something profound really just happened here, you know? And I said, okay, tell me what that means. And he goes, you know what? Just be the best tree you can be. there's only one Ken Cross in the world. There's only one Ken Cross that grew up in Brooklyn in the way you grew up. There's only one person that lived in your environment. There's only one person that shot dope the way that you shot dope. There's only one Ken Cross that lived the life that you've lived. Just be the best Ken Cross you can be. You might be a pine tree, you might be a maple tree, you might be a eucalyptus tree. We sure as fuck know you're not a rose bush. So just fucking wake up and be the best person you can be every day. Take contrary action, try not to hurt yourself or hurt anybody else. And I went, well, why did it take me 6 years to figure this fucking out, you know? Because I kept trying to understand these little paragraphs in the books that confused the shit out of me. And the reality of it is that that's all we have to fucking do, you know? And when you feel a little off, you take out some paper and you write a 10-step and say, man, this is what I did today. This is what I felt today. This is what's got me by whatever, you know? And you share it with a sponsor and you talk about it and you let go of it and you turn it over. I remember going to meetings, and if you're new, maybe you're going through this now. I would go to these meetings where the walls were plastered with shit. Turn it over. What the fuck does turn it over and why is it upside down on the wall, you know? What is this keep it simple stupid shit? It sounds like an insult, you know? Who are you calling stupid, motherfucker? You know? And today the reality of it is, keep it fucking simple, stupid. You know, it really is about all we have. The biggest lesson to learn is acceptance. I have no power over people, places, or things. I have no power over how things are going to affect me on the outside. Like I said, I went from living in a stolen car, being homeless, being a high school dropout that had already gone to jail when he was 17 years old, to running a movie studio in Hollywood. I was one of 6 people from 1917 to ever have the job I had. I had a parking spot with my name on it. I had a booth in the commissary where I took lunches, you know. I would ride my Harley Davidson onto the movie lot and they would make way for me. It's like, oh, that's Ken, give him room, you know. I thought I had arrived. I thought I was the shit. And I went to a doctor on a Thursday, and the next day I had to resign from my position and haven't worked a day since, because they told me I was going to be dead in 90 days. I hate to tell you what just happened because you'd laugh. I had a point, but I forgot it. So the reality of it was, I know what it was. We were talking about acceptance. 2 years after my brain surgery, I had another cancer surgery, a male cancer, which was not comfortable at all, to say the least. Very painful. I had complications from my brain surgery. I couldn't go out of the house. I had light and auditory overload. Energy overwhelmed me. I almost had a nervous breakdown a few times. I went from living on movie studio money to living on Social Security disability. I had no idea what was going on. I was in physical pain unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I would lay on the couch and I would squeeze my head because the pain hurt so much. The only thing I could think about was either sticking a gun in my mouth or going out and scoring some heroin because I knew how to take care of my own pain, you know? And I thought, I gotta fix this. And I had one little glimmer of hope. I'd been introduced to a gentleman that was 33 years sober and an 11-year cancer survivor, and he was a psychiatrist who specialized in addictive medicine. And I thought, I got one shot, I'm gonna call this guy. And I called him up, I went to see him, and I went in for an hour and a half, and I told him my story of woe, poor me, you don't understand. Mommy did this, Daddy did that. This hurts, that hurts, my life is over. And when we were done, he goes, I want you to do 2 things. I went, okay. He goes, when you leave, rip up the check. I thought, good deal, AA works. And then he said, I want you to keep doing exactly what your sponsor tells you to do because you're having appropriate feelings for an appropriate situation and you need how to learn how to accept what's happening in your life. And I wanted to fucking punch him. And he said, I want you to go home and I want you to call all your friends. I want you to tell them how you feel because I've been isolating for 6 months. I thought that nobody cared, nobody loved me. I'd separated myself from the fellowship. I'd separated myself from God. I didn't pray. I didn't talk to my sponsees. I told them I was too sick. I didn't want to go to meetings. I didn't want people bringing meetings to my house. I didn't want anybody in my house. I wanted to isolate. And he said, I want you to get people to come help you. I want you to call everybody and ask them what they can do for you. And I called my first sponsor who had me do an inventory, which is just exactly what I wanted to do. I called the oldest old-timer I knew and I said, I'm having problems. I hate God. I think God did this to me. If this is your fucking God, I don't want any of this. And he taught me to meditate again. He took me to flotation tanks in Venice. He taught me how to pray. He taught me again how to quiet my mind and be okay. And slowly within months, my sponsor at the time started bringing meetings to my house, and slowly the process allowed me to heal one more time, and one more time I became whole. And within 3 or 4 months of that meeting with the psychiatrist, I was back in the middle of AA and I felt absolutely perfect. And I had the blessing last week in Palm Springs that I was in a convention and walking down the hall for the first time in 10 years was the psychiatrist who's about to die in the next 3 months with his wife. And I said, Gary, you might not remember me, but this is my story. And he went, of course I remember you. And I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and I got to thank the man that changed my life. And the reality of that is, he's just another sober alcoholic at another level, And I'm going to finish this up because I'm already bored with myself. I can't imagine how you feel. But and I've told the story a couple of times, but Terry's here. We talk about work, we talk about sponsorship, we talk about the steps. I got to go to Bob's house. I got to speak in Akron, Ohio. And when I was in Bob's house, doing the tour and seeing the shit and hearing the stories and going down to the basement and buying the swag, because you got to get your Dr. Bob ashtray and your Dr. Bob coffee cup and your Dr. Bob t-shirts. And I looked over to the side and there was these bushel baskets, and I asked the little old lady, because I'd already been crying, and I said, what's that? And she goes, well, we had dry rot on the back of the house and we had to tear down the whole porch. And I said, so that's some of the foundation of Bob's house? And she goes, yeah, I guess so. And I'm like, well, can I have some? She goes, I guess so. So I'm like loading up my coffee cup with rocks and wrapping rocks in my t-shirt, and I got 2 bags of rocks. And, and I go speak at this banquet that night, and I cry the whole way. I'm just crying. I'm so absolutely grateful. And, and what I came to realize was about that gratitude is that I got to the place where 2 men got together, and it was kind of like where the rock hit the pond. You're on one of those still mornings on the lake and you throw a rock out and it just hits and then the ripples just go out, And I was at the home of all 12-step groups. And all any of us really are is just a ripple for today. And some days, some of us are bigger ripples than other days, And I'll just wrap it up with this, because it blew me away. And Gail was telling me the other day, reminded me of it. But when I was brand new on my second day, I had that really good drug addict look, like almost 6'7" and 185 pounds of badass gray skin. And I'm standing against the wall in the back in my tightest rock and roll t-shirt and my tightest jeans, waiting for my friend to show up at this big old-timer Chuck C. AA meeting in Beverly Hills. And I have no idea where my friend is. I have no idea what I'm doing. I do not know one person in the room. It's my second meeting. And all of a sudden, I see a guy in the front start walking up the main aisle, and he's tall, and he's got blonde hair, and I go, fuck, I've seen that dude on TV. He's on that show. What's he doing? And he fucking comes right up into my face and goes, dude, what's your name? I go, Ken. He goes, how long are you sober? I go, I think a day, maybe 2. He goes, it's so great to meet another guy I don't have to bend over to talk to. And I'm like, okay, what the fuck do you want with me, is what my head's saying. And he goes, what are you doing here? And I'm like, well, I was supposed to meet my friend, but he hasn't shown up. He goes, well, do you have a seat? I'm like, I don't have a seat. He goes, come with me. He takes me to the front row of Rodeo, which is all these old Beverly Hills people in coats and ties and ladies with blue hair and pearls. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? He introduces me to everybody I know. This is my new friend, Ken. Say hello to Ken. Ken, can I get you a cup of coffee? I'm like, yeah, I guess, you know. It's like, I'm like spinning out of control. Why is this actor talking to me? And he took me under his wing that night because my friend never showed up. He got hung up at work, and Eddie made sure that I was comfortable no matter what. I was scared to fucking death. I was so out of my own element, you know? And what it taught me is that when I see a guy standing in the back of the room that's all tatted up and looks like some badass biker, there's a little boy trapped in a great big body, scared to death, that doesn't know what he's doing. That's in pain and that's scared and afraid. And I spoke over here at Tempe a few years ago, and after the banquet I walked outside for some reason, probably getting fresh air, and there was some guy standing there smoking a cigarette all by himself, and I'm like, hey dude, what's happening? And he goes, oh, you know, my wife kicked me out of the house. How long are you sober? Oh, I think I got 2 days. I'm like, well, what's going on? Where do you live? Oh, I live in, I think, Gilbert or Mesa. I said, I got friends in Gilbert or Mesa. Terry lives over here. Come on, I'll hook you up with these guys. They'll take you to meetings. So they got hooked in. He got hooked in all the meetings over there in that part of town. And Terry came back from London, 2-3 years ago or something, and called me up in LA and goes, dude, you're not going to believe this. Remember that guy you talked to out on the patio? He was at this convention in London. And I went, really? I go, what's the fuck? He goes, dude, he lives in North Carolina. He's back with his wife, his kids. He's working on a convention there. He's doing all of this stuff. You know, and it was like, wow, how cool is that? He goes, yeah, but there's one thing that we never knew. And I went, what's that? He goes, his plan that night was to go home and kill himself. Because he had nowhere. Because he had nowhere else to go. And nobody was willing to talk to him, and nobody was willing to take the time to say, dude, what's really going on with you? Because every one of us is nothing more than a little scared kid trapped in a body, confused and lost because of drug addiction and alcoholism, thinking that you don't know who I am. You don't understand. You know what? We fucking understand. We have to take the time to stop and ask the question, how really are you today? Are you really here with us, or are you out there lost and separated from God? You know, and then a couple of years ago, we were in Fort Lauderdale, and Terry was in the front row, and it just reminded me of the story, and I told the story, and people are lined up afterwards, shaking my hand, and Gail told me, she goes, oh yeah, I shook your hand. And then there was this guy behind you that was the guy you were talking about. And I'm standing there shaking hands, and this guy goes, hi, I'm Nick. I go, hi, Nick, how are you? He goes, no, I'm Nick. You know, and it was that one guy who I hadn't seen in 12 years or so, who said, I just really need to thank you for taking the time to talk to me that night. You know, and he introduced me to his wife and all that stuff, and you know, it was just like, it blew me away, completely blew me away. Because I didn't do anything that I wasn't taught, that every single one of us shouldn't do at every single meeting we go to, is look for the guy that's in the most pain and try to say, hi, is there anything I can do to help? Hi, do you have a sponsor? Hi, do you have a big book? Hi, have you worked the steps? Hi, have you done this or done that? You know, can I help you in any way? Because the reality of it is any 12-step program really just comes down to one alcoholic, one drug addict helping another one. You know, my life was saved by a guy with 30 days who was able to get me into my brain surgeon that no other doctor in LA could do. And a newcomer with 30 days went to high school with this famous doctor and was able to set me up with an appointment. So you never know when the person next to you is going to be the person that saves your life. God works all around us constantly and sometimes in very mysterious ways, you know. The only thing I know is, and I talk about this, I don't talk about this, but I'm going to say that. It goes back to doing the work thing. I hear people that say, we got to do a sex inventory. We got to do this inventory. We got to do that inventory. Do a fucking grace inventory. Do a God inventory. Look back on your life, how many times you should be dead. Look back on your life and think how many times I should have been in jail or should not be with you anymore. You know, find where grace and where blessings and where God really worked in your life and saved you and brought you to this place where you are today. You know, because that's our reality. Our reality is that we're blessed. We're wrapped in a blanket of grace. We go out every day and we walk around people that we should not mix with. We have lives, we have children, we have careers, we have jobs, we live dreams way beyond anything that we ever expected. We're fucking dope fiends that should be dead or in prison. We're the bottom of the barrel of what civilization considers anything close to normal, you know? And yet what we have here is this opportunity to go out and live the greatest life you've ever experienced with the greatest love and the greatest blessings that you'll ever know, because of these 12 steps, because of this fellowship, and because of the fact that there are people here that will love you when you can't love yourself. You know, and one day at a time, your life will change, it will expand, and you will find a power greater than yourself, unlike anything you've ever known and experienced. So thanks.